Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're cracking open the blueprint of one of history's absolute most fascinating dynasties. We are going to dig into exactly how the Medici family used early banking to pile up just astronomical wealth. And honestly, in the process, how they practically invented the modern playbook for networking, influence, and corporate brand association.
So think about this for a second. How exactly do you conquer a city without an army or a throne? Imagine a family so deeply influential that their very name becomes completely inseparable from the city they control. Now, the Medici, they didn't conquer Florence with military might, and they didn't inherit some fancy royal title. Instead, they built an empire using something way more subtle and, honestly, way more powerful. They used money.
Section 1. The Foundation. Building the Medici Bank.
To really get how they pulled this off, we have to transport ourselves back to Florence in the late Middle Ages. It was this booming commercial center, really the financial heart of Europe, and its currency, the florin, was trusted absolutely everywhere. But moving money back then, it wasn't just tapping a credit card. It meant lugging around physical ledgers and literal heavy chests of coins. You had couriers on horseback dodging highwaymen, surviving shipwrecks, and battling brutal weather. It was incredibly slow and physically dangerous. But that massive friction, that created an enormous opportunity, because anyone who could figure out how to move capital safely across a highly fragmented Europe stood to make an absolute fortune.
And this is where the true ascent of the dynasty really kicks off. Born in 1360, Giovanni di Bicci, the Medici, inherited a pretty modest financial foundation. You know, he could have just been a successful local merchant living a nice, comfortable life in Florence. But Giovanni saw a much, much bigger game playing out. He realized Europe was getting more interconnected. Merchants needed financing, governments needed massive loans. So in 1397, he made his move and established the Medici Bank. Now, rather than just building one giant Scrooge McDuck-style vault in Florence, Giovanni did something brilliant. He decentralized. He set up branches in major hubs like Rome, Venice, Geneva, Bruges, and London. But establishing these branches wasn't just about moving cash around. It was actually about building a massive information web. A branch manager in London knew exactly which local merchants were struggling. A branch in Venice knew which global trade routes were about to just explode in profitability. So centuries before the internet even existed, the Medici Bank essentially monopolized international data. They became the ultimate insiders. It really all boils down to this one reality. Money creates opportunities, but relationships create power. And information can create both. By holding all the best information, the Medici built this incredible network of trust all across the continent, and that trust eventually landed them the ultimate client, the Catholic Church. The papacy needed to move vast sums of wealth all over Europe, and the Medicis stepped right in to handle those incredibly complex people finances. This wasn't just lucrative for them, it gave them unmatched prestige. They weren't just successful merchants anymore, they were the trusted bankers of the Vatican. Honestly, it's almost impossible to overstate just how massive that was. Section 2. The Art of Quiet Power.
Enter Giovanni's son, Cosimo de' Medici. He's the one who took the stage and completely transformed the family's immense financial wealth into absolute political influence. But there was a catch. Florence, officially, was a republic, which meant power was supposed to be shared. Cosimo knew full well that if he strutted around acting like a king, he'd get exiled or literally killed. So he mastered something called quiet power. It's the ability to operate as a private citizen while quietly pulling the strings of a republic through alliances, favors, and highly strategic loans. Cosimo rarely ruled openly. Instead, he completely separated formal authority from real influence, using his massive wealth to prop up political allies safely behind the scenes.
Section 3. Patronage as branding. But here's the thing. Money alone cannot buy permanent loyalty. For that, you need legitimacy. Now, we usually think of patronage as just simple charity, right? But for the Medici, it was a brilliantly calculated public relations tool. It was a strategic way to convert their crazy private wealth into the appearance of public contribution, mostly just to avoid resentment. They weren't just hoarding gold in a tower. They were actively paying to build churches, grand libraries, and these beautiful public works. They were literally weaving their family name into the very fabric and beauty of the city itself. Fast forward a bit to Cosimo's grandson, Lorenzo the Magnificent, and Florence had become the undisputed intellectual center of Europe. I mean, just picture walking into a Medici dinner party. You'd be rubbing shoulders with the absolute greatest minds of the era. The family sponsored architects, painters, sculptors, and scholars. Revolutionary artists like Sandro Botticelli and Michelangelo were completely intertwined with the Medici world. It was a cultural roster unlike anything history had ever seen. And there's a really profound bit of psychology at play here. Wealth hoarded away creates resentment for sure, but wealth presented as a public service, that creates fierce loyalty. Cosimo and his family completely understood that visible, selfish extravagance was a political death sentence. So turning their private wealth into awe-inspiring public masterpieces wasn't just them being generous. It was the ultimate defense mechanism against political resistance. Because if the public is fiercely proud of what you're building for them, they're far less likely to try and overthrow you.
Section 4. The Fall of the Bank.
But here comes the massive narrative twist. While Lorenzo was busy funding this incredible cultural golden age, those exact same political entanglements were quietly rotting the bank from the inside out. See, in its early days, the bank's strategic growth relied on smart commercial loans, trusted local managers, and really strict financial discipline. But over time, the political risks crept in. The bank expanded so fast that those distant branches became completely unmanageable. Branch managers started making risky, unauthorized calls. And the fatal flaw? They started approving massive loans for political favors instead of sound commercial returns. Blind political loyalty basically replaced pure economics. It really reveals a timeless and kind of harsh business lesson. Political power can protect a business for a while, but it absolutely cannot permanently replace sound economics. By the late 15th century, branches across Europe were completely failing. Huge loans to royals just couldn't be collected. The Medici had expanded way faster than their ability to actually control the system, and eventually, the legendary Medici Bank just collapsed.
Section 5. A Legacy Beyond Money.
But here is the fascinating historical paradox. The bank vanished, right? But the family totally survived. The Medici had successfully converted all that financial capital into aristocratic and social capital. I mean, just look at the incredible dynasty they produced long after the bank went under. 4 popes, Catherine de' Medici, who became Queen of France, Marie de' Medici, who also became Queen of France, and literal generations of Grand Dukes of Tuscany. Through really strategic marriages, they embedded themselves into the absolute highest royal courts of Europe. So the banking empire disappeared, but the political dynasty, it remained practically untouchable.
This right here is the ultimate Medici playbook. Step 1, financial capital. They build a massive, continent-spanning banking network. Step 2, social access. That incredible wealth literally buys them proximity to the church and international royalty. Step 3, political influence. They leverage that elite access to quietly pull the strings of the Florentine Republic. And finally, step 4, cultural legacy. They use their immense influence to fund the Renaissance itself. It's mind-blowing when you think about it. A simple commercial loan back in the 14th century was pushed through this exact pipeline to literally create centuries of cultural immortality.
Centuries before today's massive corporate PR departments even existed, the Medici understood a core truth. A powerful brand is not built only through products, it is built through association. They didn't just want to be remembered for boring ledgers and interest rates. They proactively branded themselves by associating the family name with progress, high intelligence, education, and breathtaking Renaissance architecture. They essentially anchored their family legacy to the advancement of human civilization itself. The bank vanished. The culture survived. Their greatest achievement wasn't being the wealthiest family in Europe. Their true, undeniable genius was ensuring that before their wealth ever ran out, it was converted into something that humanity would absolutely never be able to forget. Just look around today at the billionaires, the giant tech conglomerates, and the massive multinational firms of our era. They are literally studying this exact playbook right now. So I'll leave you with this. Which modern empires are building their own Renaissance today? Keep an eye on exactly where the money flows into culture, because, as we've seen, that is where the real legacy is being built. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember to keep questioning the blueprints of power all around you.